This episode of Jackie's Groove is brought to you by Jambox. Jambox is a hands-free, breath-powered mini instrument that brings the joy of music creation to all ages and all abilities. Jambox. www.jamboxx.com.
A song is a story. And if you're going to be just drumming yourself to death over this song that nobody can understand what the lyric is about, it's not really a story anymore. It becomes a drum solo. And I was never a drum soloist. I was an accompanist. And I learned that very young in life.
Welcome to Jackie's Groove. Come journey with us through the rhythm of the music business with your host, Jackie Bertoni.
A little more action, please.
Hey, with the Monkees.
Hey guys, welcome to Jackie's Groove. This is Jackie Bertoni, brought to you by Intertalk Radio and Intertalk Media. Connect to all things music. It is a beautiful, beautiful sunny day here in Southern California. And what's going to make it even more brighter is I'm blown away. I'm talking prior to us going on the air, and I had the pleasure of talking to this gentleman about a week and a half ago when he called me at my home, and it still blows me out of the water. We're talking about a legendary drummer who is just recently, when it doesn't make any sense to me, the recipient, and why it took so damn long, of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Grammys. The gentleman I'm talking about is Mr. Hal Blaine. Hal Blaine is a living legend, American drummer and a session musician extraordinaire. He is the patriarch of the Wrecking Crew. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's a 10-year-old movie, but it's called The Wrecking Crew. Please do yourself a favor and watch this movie. It's on Netflix right now as we speak. He's played with Nancy Sinatra, Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, John Denver, the Ronettes, Simon and Garfunkel, the Carpenters, the Beach Boys, etc., etc., etc. There's not enough hours in the day to talk about this man's illustrious career. So with that said, I want to welcome with open arms and open ears to Jackie's Groove, the legend, Mr. Hal Blaine. Hal, welcome to Jackie's Groove.
Thanks, Jack.
Man, I got to tell you, brother, I'm looking at a Bible of paperwork here. I'm not going to blow smoke, the quintessential smoke up your tuchus here, but I'm blown away. Everybody's just blown away in the studio. We're just talking, half hour before you and I and Paul and Florentino got on the phone. It's amazing, everything you've done. Just when I think that I've accomplished a lot in my 58 years of life, going to be 58 tomorrow. Happy birthday to me. And also a belated happy birthday, Hal.
My goodness. Yeah.
Well, February the 5th, we missed your 89th birthday celebration. God bless your heart, brother boy. And happy birthday from Jackie and everybody at the network. But with that said, when I look down and I think I've accomplished some great things, it falters by a huge, strides of what this man has accomplished in life. Hal, with that said, I want to start out just by asking you, in the 89 years you've graced this world, and let's step back away from music. Let's talk about the Hal Blaine of today. Hey, Hal, how do you spend your days now? What do you do in the life of Hal Blaine on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'm doing a lot of sleeping.
Good boy.
When I can. It's sort of like catching up from the days that I was doing so many sessions and was not getting, complete sleep. I'm kind of getting that complete sleep now. And that's about all I can tell you. It's me and the television
God
my
bless
family
you.
moved in with me, and they're kind of taking care of me and feeding me, and instead of being in an old folks' home, that type of thing.
It's never going to happen,
And it's
brother.
been very nice. It seems a little crowded now,
That's okay.
but that's just part of life. That's all. It's just everything is just fine. I'm as happy as can be. I understand I will be receiving my Grammy on the 14th of July.
Finally.
At the Dolby Theater in Hollywood, a beautiful theater. And it's pretty exciting. I mean, after all these years, there's no telling. I don't really have a number on how many Grammy recordings I was on. I know that I recently had my number 8 Grammy Record of the Year, which was the... oh God, I just lost it. I don't know why.
As you're thinking about that, let me help you here, because we're talking about you've played on 40 number 1 hit singles, 150 top 10 hits, and performed on your own, accounting just over 35,000 recorded tracks. I mean, you'd have to be dumbfounded to remember a fraction of those amounts. And I am. And Hal, I want to ask you a question. Forgive me for being so blatant, because I don't always agree with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even though we've been blessed to have interviewed many Rock and Roll Hall of Fame recipients. But my question is, what took so long for the Grammys to realize your greatness?
Well, the Grammys are a major organization. The Recording Academy,
right,
and of our industry, and it's just one of those things. I was fortunate enough to. This whole thing started with me actually being in the right place at the right time. Correct. When that dirty word rock and roll came along, and most of the great studio drummers refused. They said, "We're not going to play that garbage. It's junk. It's 3 chord changes."
Right.
And, what most of the general public did not understand was that we were all graduates of music schools, universities, et cetera. And when they found out, after they found out, I mean, the stories just go on and on and on of people hiring us that thought we did not read music. They thought that we knew nothing about music.
Right.
We were tagged rock and roll players. Well, I actually came off the Count Basie band. So if you want to talk jazz, you can't get any jazzier than the Bill Basie.
Of course.
And that, with Freddie and all the, I mean, it was an amazing orchestra that I was lucky enough to perform with at the Waldorf in New York, at the, I think it's the Skylark
room, exactly.
Whatever that room was, up there. And I was offered the Basie band, and I would have loved to have done that because I knew most of those arrangements backwards. And Sonny Payne was a friend of mine. He's just a sweetheart of a guy. It's too long a story to go into right now. But that was my background. My background was I started, like so many other people, as a youngster. My sister Marcia, God bless her, she gave me my first set of drums.
Wow, it's her fault.
And I just gave, not just, but a few years ago, I gave my nephew Michael, who lives in Phoenix, and he has a great big band, plus his little bands. And I gave him his first set of drums when he was about 13 or 14. And he's got a great band over in Phoenix, plays all these wonderful jobs, and he loves it over there. In fact, not long after we hang up, I'm getting in the car and I'm driving over to Phoenix to hang out a little bit. I'm going to look over Sedona. I've never been there. I want to see what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
And So getting back to the original downbeat, I guess I was lucky enough to have played with all those people you mentioned, plus the rest of them. There's just so many. It's impossible. And it just goes on and on and on. And it still amazes me that people like Earl Palmer, who was, a great drummer from Nashville, not Nashville, but New Orleans. And he came out here and, fell into the similar vat of chocolate that I fell into. And he started referring me to other band leaders and arrangers and composers, because I did not refuse to play. I mean, I just wanted to play my drums, and that's what I did. And it was always in fun. And I just, thank goodness, never got involved in the drug scene. Absolutely. And it really wasn't as bad as people talked about at the time, about crazy hop-head musicians. It really wasn't that way. I mean, in all these years of sessions, I never saw drugs in the studio. There was always laughter about it, and there was
of course
talk about it. But it wasn't really happening the way things get blown out of proportion.
Right, of course.
Just ridiculous. And I would say that most of the musicians that I recorded with, Joe Osborne, the great bass player, Larry Neckel, who received a Grammy for the record we did with Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. And a well-deserved Grammy for Larry, and I was sorry to see him pass on. But you learn as you get older. I mean, I can't believe I'm pushing 90 years old.
God bless your heart.
But that's the way it is, and that's the way life is. And I've had my ups and downs, and I came out okay. And that's all I can say. I was very, very fortunate. I got to work with some of the greatest musicians and people in the world. When I think of Barbra Streisand coming over to me and saying, "Hello, gorgeous."
Yeah, happy birthday to her, by the way, also. Yeah,
Pardon?
2 days ago, Barbara celebrated her 74th birthday, I think, on the 24th.
She's still a youngster.
Hey, Hal, let me ask you a question. It's 1,000 questions here. One from my cousin in New York who's had the pleasure of actually producing 2 album covers for Elvis, and we'll get to that in a second. But I want to find out something that's more pressing to me, since you and I have something in common. We have never worked together, recorded together, even though we are surrounded by the same people. People want to find out, and also too, I want to say, Connie Wilson, Brian Wilson's daughter, is listening to the interview as we speak, and she says she hasn't seen you for 10 years, but tell Uncle Hal I said hi and I love him. And so that's from Connie Wilson. My question for you, my friend, is I've had the pleasure of recording with Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys myself in the later years, in the contemporary years. In fact, I had the pleasure of working and playing all the percussion on the Beach Boys Stars and Stripes Volume 1. It was the last album the Beach Boys ever played with as a conducive unit before the passing of Carl Wilson back in 1999. My question I want to ask you, and so do the listeners want to find out also, what is the difference, or what could you say would be the difference of working with Brian Wilson back in the day with the Beach Boys and all this situation? Let me change the question up even more. How was it for you working with Brian Wilson? I can tell you what I felt. Did you say, or would you believe that he is the genius that is the moniker that he carries with him?
Well, that word genius is kicked around a lot.
Yes.
And who's to really say, who is really a genius? I mean, Brian Wilson was a young man that came along. He used to come to the Phil Spector sessions. There's so many things in advance of that. Phil Spector had a big sign on the door: no admittance, closed session, keep out, stay away, all these things. But if anyone stuck their head in the outer room that led into the actual recording studio, Phil would go grab them and drag them into the studio, and he would say, "Hal, give them a tambourine, give them maracas, give them something."
Really?
And that's how that whole thing started. And my friend Steve Douglas, that we used to call Mr. Saxophone, a super nice man, and he played that chicken saxophone thing of his that became so very popular. And unfortunately, he passed away.
Right. And
that led to me doing some of the contracting for Phil. And he used to say, give Carol a call, let her come in with all of the great guitarists that were playing on the Phil Spector sessions. Phil Spector came from New York, and just tore this town up. I mean, when it was a Phil Spector session, it was always Friday night at Gold Star with Larry Levine on the knobs before the days of faders.
Right.
I could go on and on and on and on. And they were historical. I mean, it was the way Phil worked and the way he worked with everybody, and especially with me, where he wouldn't let me play a note until it was time to record. He would rehearse and he played some piano, he played some guitar himself.
Right.
And he had his own ideas, talk about genius. And, to this day, I mean, I must say, and I'm not going to get political on or
please,
involved in the crime situation, but I know that it was an accident. I know that he didn't just pull a gun out and kill somebody.
Right, of course.
She was a beautiful woman, and it's a horrible, horrible thing, and he's paying for it now. And we all make our own beds, and we have to sleep in our own beds.
Absolutely.
So, fortunately, Phil Spector, one of the people that used to come to the session was a young fellow by the name of Brian Wilson. We didn't know Brian. We didn't know he had a little group called the Pendletons at the time. Mm-hmm. And they were surfer kids. Actually, Dennis, the drummer, was the only real surfer in the group.
Absolutely. And
he turned out to be a good friend of mine. He loved, people asked, wasn't he upset that you played the drum? No, he loved it. This gave him the day that he could be out driving his cars that he was buying, his beautiful yacht that he had. He was just a very, very gracious young man, and he was the typical surfer boy. He had the long blonde hair. He was a gorgeous-looking kid, and the women loved him. And because when they walked on stage, everyone was watching Dennis knock the hell out of the drums. He was a much better pianist than he was a drummer. So, and I've said this many times, all of the great Shelley Mann and all these great I can't even think of all their names now. All these great studio drummers refused to play this new genre called rock and roll.
Why?
It was just filthy, simple music that could be played by children, so to speak. And these producers had no idea that we were all graduates of universities, of music schools, Berkeley and Boston. It goes on and on and on. And they had no idea. And when they hired us,
right,
they used to treat us like we were infants. Fellas, we just want you to do your thing. There's a little scene in this movie that we're going to be some of your music, which is called rock and roll, and we're saying, okay. They didn't know we were doing rock musicals. I saw one of the earliest movies recently, and it was called, what was it, The Beach? Oh, God.
Take your time.
I just saw the movie with Frankie Avalon.
Oh, Beach Blanket Bingo, or
Beach Blanket Bingo. That's exactly it. That was exactly it. That was one of the early movies that we did, and these producers did not know or realize in the early days how much experience we did have. I mean, I personally worked for Walt Disney. I worked as an actor for Walt Disney.
Crazy.
People don't know these things. But that was all part of the background, and somewhere that stuff was coming out of my brain to create certain parts of music. When Shelly Manne, one of the great drummers in the world, called me and said, "Hal, what is it you do with this rock and roll? What is that? What is it?" And I would say, "Shelly, it's just a backbeat on 2 and 4. If you happen to be in 3, it could be a backbeat on 2 or 3. And pretty soon, all these drummers started calling me and asking if they could come to watch me on a session.
Really?
So they could all learn what it was all about. And it was one of those, like, overnight wildfire type terrible things. But for me, fortunate, very fortunate for me. And I had a personal secretary who did all my bookings, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, for me, it was an incredible, incredible ride. There were ups, there were downs, there was a divorce, there was, that wiped me out. It was just part of life.
But Mama, what Mama said, but Mama always told us, what does not kill us only makes us stronger. And that's probably why you're standing to this day, or sitting right now, and telling these amazing stories. And I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, because I want to find out, because I'm curious. I'm a boy right now, and I'm listening to a mentor. But, who were some of the favorite projects that you played on, or someone that you played with that you still listen to today and still enjoy? Can you think about that?
Well, it's actually a little difficult, because there were so many projects that I was fortunate enough to have played on, and all of the accolades that were coming in all the time. Producers were literally coming from all over the world, from England, Spain, France, Germany, South America, Colombia, all these countries. These people wanted. There's a group that I call the Wrecking Crew.
Right, of course.
And the reason I call this the Wrecking Crew was because we would go in and do sessions, and we would hear the elder session players who were just leaving to give us time to record a track or something. And I would hear these older guys saying, "These kids are going to wreck the business." And they were always in 2- and 3-piece suits, they carried their own ashtrays and things like that. Nobody ever spoke or made jokes or anything on sessions. And they were working with all the great composers at 20th, at Warner Brothers, at Capitol, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just started calling us the Wrecking Crew, because these people had no idea of our backgrounds until they found out, and almost immediately jumped that line and wanted to be part of our Wrecking Crew when they realized what was going on, when they would get behind me in line at the union picking up our work checks. I mean, it was just one of the big things at the union was never get behind Hal Blaine if you come in to pick up checks, because you're going to be there a long time.
Was that 47 right there on? Was that for Local 47?
Local 47, of course.
Yeah. Hey, Hal, let me ask you a question, my friend. Let me jump in real quick. I'm real curious to find out, because I'm amazed right now. If you could see the smile on my face, sir, it's why, it's ear to ear. And of all the beautiful interviews that I've conducted over the last 2 years, I got to tell you, this goes down in my history books of talking to Hal Blaine. And Hal, I want to ask you a question. You're a good-looking man to this day, and you were a good-looking man back then, you know, in your heyday. I'm curious to find out, as a session player, and me as a session player, I'm a happily married man going on 35 years this year, in November. I want to find out from you and also the listeners, were there groupies back then? And if there was, how did you deal with them?
Well, the thing was, as I was growing, one of the things that I remember vividly was the Bobby Soxer. The Bobby Soxer or Soxers were the kids that sat and watched Frank Sinatra at the Paramount, New York, and they would scream and holler and carry on. Mm-hmm. What I found out later in life, because I actually I became part of the Sinatra family, which I was thrilled about. To this day, I love Nancy Sinatra. She's just a sweetheart. She's my neighbor. And we were together, on records. I mean, her first record that we did was These Boots Are Made for Walking. And that was a song that opened up so many doors. The name Sinatra was a magical name, of course. And that's when I started hanging with the Sinatra clan. And I recorded with Frank and with Nancy and with Little Frank, as we called him. And God bless her, Big Nancy, as we called her, Frank's wife of all those original years, she just celebrated her 101st birthday. And she's just a sweetheart of a lady. And anyway, so, everything was falling into place. The word gets around real quick. People, producers are very superstitious. I mean, Phil Spector, for example, would only record Friday nights. You had to choose the same studio, the same engineer, the same seats, the same microphones. And I've talked about this before. If we took a break, we were like ballerinas getting around the studio to not touch a microphone that was gently set by Phil, and it was set in cement. Do not touch the microphones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That led to Brian Wilson coming and hanging and watching us. That's where he fell in love, so to speak, with us. Brian used to come to my home, and he wanted a home just like mine. I bought a mansion in the Hollywood Hills right behind the Hollywood Bowl. The word got around so quick. It was unbelievable. Who is this guy, Hal Blaine? He's a drummer. What do you mean he's a drummer? He's on so many hit records. And I had 6 years of Grammy Record of the Year. And then eventually 2 more. So when I retired, I had 8 Grammy-winning records of the year. I guess an unheard of record, if that would be a record. But some of those records that we did, like MacArthur Park, the stuff that some of the stars that when they brought me to England to record, when Simon Garfunkel brought me to New York to record, and I was doing all these major hits. Even today, if I get in the car and turn on the radio, I just did a radio documentary with XM Radio, Lou Simon, and those people. They're major, major people. So naturally, and I don't think I ever got a big head over it, I was thrilled. The money was coming in, but I mainly just wanted to play my drums, and that's what it was all about from the time I was a youngster, which started me out. I was born in Holyoke, Massachusetts, right, but raised in Hartford, Connecticut. I went to Weaver High School, and a lot of great people came out of Emma Richards came out of Weaver High School.
Absolutely.
A whole bunch of great people came out of that high school.
and you just mentioned Emil Richards. People don't realize that Emil was was made famous by his bongo solos on Mission Impossible. And,
there's so many things. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Do you ever find yourself pinching yourself, Hal, and realizing the fact, and it's okay to blow smoke up your own tuchus, as I said before, but you have to sit back. When I sit in my studio and I look at all the platinum albums around, that I've been blessed to play with, falters by fractions of what you've ever, and I ever will accomplish. But do you ever find yourself smiling and laughing at laughing not sarcastically, but looking back and saying, you know what, if my life ends today, I've done it all. Do you find yourself just in awe of yourself?
I've said that a million times. A million times I've said that.
Yeah.
If it all ends today, I've done it all.
And
it's
Hal,
true, because I hardly miss anything.
I'm sitting here right now.
Hit records, #1 records,
right?
Top 10 records. One of my license plates, my famous license plates, was top 10.
I love it.
I mean, it just every inch of my work has somehow been publicized, fantasized, whatever.
Sure.
I've become, close friends with all the great studio musicians. I mean, every time I went into the studio and I saw Gene Cipriano, I mean, one of the great, incredible players that worked with all of these incredible musicians. I mean, there were major composers that hired me, and they would say, "Don't worry about the music, just do your thing." I mean, they put such faith in me because of the superstitions of the music. The same musicians that played on hit records. That's how I happened to get connected with Don Pystrup, one of the great jingle commercials writers, because his wife danced on a commercial. His beautiful wife danced on a commercial that was a Goodyear commercial, and they wanted the same people that played on the record of Boots Are Made for Walking, because this commercial was a new product called Wide Boots, and that's how I met Don Pystrup, the great arranger, an incredible arranger. He wrote so much of the stuff for Buddy Rich's band and all these people, and he's just a sweetheart of a guy. And he kept me working for so many years in the studio doing commercials that people would be, and I'm still shocked to remember that I did the early stuff of Ronald McDonald. I mean,
yeah, man.
All this kind of stuff. Burger King, it just goes on and on and on, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. It's just an amazing time. And all of a sudden I bought a Rolls Royce. I mean, that word gets around town real quick. My God.
Absolutely. I mean, how dare you drive around a Rolls Royce?
A lot of that fame happened to me. Not only was I doing, the things that they allowed me to do, the things that I felt, and there were things that I learned as an actor, because I used to go in and work on certain scenes and certain things, and all these great actors that I was working with, and I would hear them saying, "What's my motivation? What is this scene all about?" They wanted to know everything about it, and that's when I fell into the recording situation. I called it falling into a vat of chocolate. And I worked exactly the way I would work in film. What is my motivation? What is this song about? I mean, and I asked you, I said, what is a song? A song is a story. And if you're going to be just drumming yourself to death over this song that nobody can understand what the lyric is about, it's not really a story anymore. It becomes a drum solo, and I was never a drum soloist. I was an accompanist, and I learned that very young in life.
You played for the music.
And that was just part of my thing. I loved listening to the music, listening to demos, listening to the song. What is the song about? If it was a beautiful love song, when I did the record, and, you know, God bless anybody. When I did The Way We Were with Barbra Streisand, one of the most beautiful, gorgeous, incredible songs ever written. I just lost the songwriter's name. In fact, he played piano for us. I think he conducted it when we did The Way We Were. Anyway, you know, working with people like that, working with the great actor in England, I got to meet all these great actors and musicians and some of the great drummers from England.
I'd have to look up Marvin Hamlisch.
I'd have to say again.
Marvin Hamlisch.
Oh, Marvin Hamlisch, right.
Yes.
Marvin was an amazing guy. He was a rehearsal pianist at CBS and connected and wrote some of these incredible songs. And he was a wonderful guy.
Let me ask you a question. What I'm taking from all of this that you're telling me is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, when Hal Blaine walked into a session, I don't care if it was at Capitol, if it was at Western, whatever it was in L.A., and what I'm taking from this, did you have free reign, so to speak, when you walked into the session? Did you walk in as the Hal Blaine when you already made your name? Or were you sequestered to what the artist wanted you to play?
Well, you know, it's all of the above. I wanted to hear the songs. A song is a story, and I wanted to know what the story was or what my motivation was, beside a paycheck. I tried to tell guys that, you know, one of the sayings that I came up with early on, because I would hear guys come into a session, all the microphones would be on, and the guys would come in and to open up their instrument cases, and they would look at the music, and one of the guys in particular said, "Oh, the same old shit every day, day after day." And so I took him by the collar, so to speak, and I took him out into the hallway, and I said, "Do you like your new home? Do you like your new car? Do you like your new golf clubs?" Because he was a great golfer. And he said, "Yeah, of course." Well, I said, "Because every microphone was on, and when this date is over with, the producer's going to come to me and say, 'I never want that guy on another session with us.'"
I love it. I love it.
And that's what it was. I mean, you know, so I started an expression. If you smile, you stay around a while. If you pout, you out. And pretty soon the word got around real good. When you come into a session, show some interest. If we do a take and you made a little mistake, tell somebody about it. Don't wait for them to start mixing a day or two later and find your mistake, because they're going to remember that. And also we have to remember that in those days, the contractors were like Adolf Hitler's. Absolutely. They were just standing there waiting for you to make a mistake so they could never call you again. Mm-hmm. It was very, very important socially to be nice, to show interest in the song you're about to record or you just recorded. Right. And you know, and show some interest that, whoa, great song. The singer sounds wonderful. I love this. You know, don't just run to the telephone to call your answering service and say, "Where am I going next?" Right. It was very difficult times for guys, especially very well classically trained musicians. And those are the guys that usually the string players, the violinists, the cellists, etc. And they were wonderful people and wonderful players, but they all came from the school of 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers and all the great, Capitol Records. I mean, I was lucky enough to be at the opening of Capitol Records. I still have the little souvenir alarm clock that they gave me with the picture of the Capitol Tower. I was doing a lot of work at Capitol with all these people that they didn't know who I was. I was just, all they knew was he's a rock drummer. Let him make a hit record for us. That's all. The whole thing in the music business was but the bottom line. Who makes... Hold on one second.
Bless you.
In the music, like a lot of other businesses, the main thing was the bottom line. Was there going to be a profit? How many can we sell, et cetera, et cetera. Absolutely. And before you know it, all the guys were working on, gosh, I did 3 sessions yesterday. It's amazing. And some of these guys were out there just like myself, wondering if they'd ever get a job. Dig it. And pretty soon they became a part of not the nucleus of the wrecking crew, but so many times they were brought in, as sidemen in big orchestral things. And it made you very proud. I get in my car right now and turn on the radio, and I will hear a record that I did. And sometimes I will even hear a disc jockey saying, that's Hal Blaine. I have been searching for one of my great trophies that I have in my trophy case was from Dean Martin. We did a particular session with, I think it was Everybody Loves Somebody, and that was a big hit for Dean, and it was on Frank Sinatra's label. And I was driving home from whatever session, and I turned on my radio, and I recognized Dean's voice. And he was talking about his latest album on Reprise, which was Frank Sinatra's album. Right. And he said, and the jock asked him about the great band that was always playing behind Dean. And Dean said, I got that great Hal Blaine on drums, and if he plays them drums any louder or any harder, we're going to give him the Golden Truss Award. Well, that was one of the funniest things I ever heard. It was just a joke. Maybe it came from Jerry Lewis. I don't know. And I don't know. It wasn't a couple of months later, there was a knock at my door, and this beautiful box arrived, and it was from Dean Martin, and it was a Golden Truss Award. It almost looked like an Oscar.
You can't find that?
From Dean. And I've asked all over the place if anyone heard that or anyone has it on tape. I would love to get it, just to have it. But I do have that wonderful trophy that Dean gave me. I mean, I got to record with all of the what do they call them? The Rat Pack.
Yeah.
All these. I mean, Frank Sinatra was just an absolute sweetheart. In fact, one of my favorite pieces of memorabilia is a necktie that Frank gave me. One of his puffy little neckties that used to come out like you tied it like a bow tie, but it puffed out. I have a belt buckle that Johnny Cash handed me personally, with the whole band watching. Too long a story to go into, but these are the kind of things that make you so grateful that you were there and did your job and, became a part of the musical history and the musical world. I mean, there's very few people it's especially drummers, of course, that haven't heard about me because I never got into the drugs. I never got into the booze. And let's face it, musicians had terrible names, thanks to Gene Krupa, when he got caught with a little bit of marijuana, which today is, of course, is almost legal all over the world.
Right.
And I just never got into that stuff. I hated the taste of the booze, and I hated the smell of the marijuana, and I just never got into that stuff. And so I did not fit into that hophead, dopehead musicians. R&R, rock and roll, to me, meant reliability and responsibility. I was there on time. I did my job. I asked questions when necessary. I didn't bother anybody, and trying to make a name for myself.
Sure.
I wasn't even thinking about making a name for myself. I was thinking about the fact that how lucky I was to be playing my drums behind Frank Sinatra, behind Elvis Presley, all these people that I was playing with. I mean, it was just, and here I am again saying me, I. Well, this is an interview with me and I.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to get that across. I really couldn't, I just didn't care anything about the fame or fortune. Of course, I loved getting my checks. Of course, I loved getting residuals, getting what they call today new use checks. When I turn on the radio, when I hear a commercial with one of the records that I was lucky enough to play on, and then a check comes in the mail from an ad agency or whoever, and they're called new use checks. They're not residuals. People usually refer to as residuals, but residuals generally meant a check that you got every 13 weeks. You kept getting that check for as long as that commercial played. And I don't know, it became second nature. I bought a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, and the word got around real quick. Brian used to come to my house and sit. He loved the piano that I had in the living room, and he loved that piano. And he loved that house. And he had bought another house in Bel Air, almost exactly like mine. It was a Spanish Mediterranean. It was just a sign of the times. But those things get around so quickly. The publicity, the people who are taking pictures, the what do you call these people that drive around?
Paparazzi. Yeah.
Paparazzi, exactly.
Now, let me ask you a question, sir. I'm real curious to find out, because of all the history that we're going through right now, and God knows we're not going to have enough time, and that's why we're going to do a live interview together in the very near future for those listening right now. But I have to ask this question, sir, and I want to ask this, and I want you to be honest with me. What would you tell a younger Hal Blaine about the music business and about life that you've learned all these years?
Well, the only philosophies that I live by is stay away from drugs and booze, because your friends can help pull you down. Try to play with good musicians. Try to learn as much as you can.
Okay.
Don't try to be a show-off. The drummers are the biggest show-offs in the world.
Of course we are.
And when I get to work sometimes live, and they have a percussionist included with conga drums, all of a sudden he becomes the star of the show. I mean, every time you go to you're recording a song, or you're live on stage and you're playing a song, and every time you're trying to do what you did on the record, which did not have conga drums,
right,
or all these other drums that a lot of these percussionists had. And as I said before, we're all major show-offs. Drummers are used to be. Then guitar players came along. They could jump all over the stage wirelessly. Getting back to the original message, what I would tell guys is keep your nose clean. Don't try to be the biggest show-off in the world, because you're never going to be. There is a star singing a song, and the song is a story. And if you're back there pounding your drums, they're not going to hear the story.
Sure.
And that's part of what I really learned from the method actors that I worked with. Some of the great Yul Brynner and Sal Mineo, who was a friend of mine, and Sal did the Gene Krupa story. I mean, these people, they were legends to me, and all of a sudden I'm sitting having coffee with them. It was just an amazing time. So naturally, I was thrilled. And these new and up-and-coming young people who are studying music, when I received my Percussive Arts Society Lifetime Achievement Award, I mean, that was, to me, one of the biggest thrills in the world.
Sure. Because
here were all the great percussionists and drummers in the world. I guess who had voted for me, I'm not positive how that works exactly. But, you know, they brought me to Texas, and it was an amazing time.
And just so you know, that's how it works. It's your peers that are voting for you. And Percussive Arts Society that Hal's talking about is called PASIC, Percussive Arts Society International Conference. And that is the quintessential. Exactly. That is the quintessential hat off. I mean, even above and beyond, in my professional opinion, above the Grammy Achievement Award. You know, that you're being recognized by your peers. And Hal, I got to ask you a question also, because you really answered that beautifully. Because I always usually ask, you know, what's the one thing that you would leave as an advice, a lesson or legacy to those around you? And I think you already answered that. You know, you just keep your nose strong, play for the music. Realize your goal and your purpose as the drummer, because you realized at an early age that you're not Sinatra, you're not Elvis, you're not and the like. You're the player that was hired for that. Now, I want to ask you a question also, too, because I'm looking at my clock right now, and we're just not going to have enough time. But I want to find out, as you said, when you jump in the car and you hear a repurposed song or a song that you recorded on over the years, was there any recording you can think off the top of your head that you listen to this day and you go, shit, I really wish I would have caught or played something different on that tune? And what tune was that? Can you remember?
You know, I have no idea. I do know that one of my favorite drum accompanists was a song by the Fifth Dimension called Dimension 5.
Yeah. A
song that I did, it was brushwork, actually. But every time I hear that, boy, oh boy, it just knocks me out. I really did such a great job. And of course, when I hear A Little Less Conversation, that's also, you know, it was just drums. There was so much drumming going on. And when I did the show, I used to do the show Three's Company. And when I hear, you know, the drums that I designed, that Ludwig called the Octoplus. I had an octave of drums that I designed and built with Rick Fauché, was my drum tech for just over 50 years. Unfortunately, we lost him a couple of years ago. He was always one set of drums in front of me and one set of drums behind me. All I ever had to do was walk in, sit down, and play. When the session was over, I would go in, I would thank whoever, I would listen to the playbacks and so forth, show some interest, and then go on to the next session. When I walked in, my drums were already set up. Everything was perfectly there, because I could not have done any of it. I mean, been that busy without Rick Fauché, Faucher. Rick was just an amazing mechanic, and he loved music. He was a big jazz fan, and he loved the fact that he was around the thing. He was around me. He was around the bassy band. I mean, Rick Fauché was a major part of my life. And just a sweetheart of a guy.
Let me jump in real quick. As you're just turned 89, I'm turning 58. People who know Jackie Bertoni know that I have MS. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis back 22 years ago. And there's certain times how, as we talked about before, about getting up on stages that aren't handicapped, capable, getting us up, like when you played 2 years ago with Ronnie Spector and Liberty DeVito at NAMM. I mean, it took you 20 minutes to get up on that friggin' stage because they didn't have the proper equipment to get us up there on our scooters. There's a company I'm going to introduce you to real quick. It's called Jambox, JAMBOXX.com. I'm going to get one out to you. I'm going to have the studio send you one because what it enables us to do now, it's a wind-powered instrument that's played with our mouth. So when you have been stricken by any catastrophic disease such as MS and or ALS or anything that quadriplegic, paraplegic, that you thought you could no longer play music, you can now do it now as long as you can blow into this instrument that looks like a harmonica. And as we get older and as our abilities change, Jambox enables Hal Blaine to get back up and start playing instruments again. We'll talk more about that offline, and we're going to introduce you to this company. But it's amazing how,
that's very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to introduce you to it. I'm going to have Florentino call you, the CEO of our network, and we're going to get Mike to send you out one because it's amazing. Okay. And it's a major benefit for, it's difficult for you to be jumping up behind the drums all the time. And on the days that my right side doesn't want to cooperate with me in the studio and I usually give up, I can now use this instrument and it duplicates that of it's a plug-in. And it makes up with Pro Tools and Logic, and we'll talk more about that. But what I want to talk about, my friend Mr. Blaine, is that when I sit at home like I did last week, and the phone rang at 8:30, and on my iPhone it said Hal Blaine. And I said to you, and I quote, "Isn't it past your bedtime?" And you said to me, Jackie, as I was going to ask you the same question. And 2 years ago, the phone rang at night. It was 11 o'clock at night. It was Brian Wilson. And just to call to say hi, to see how you're doing, how's your health. But I want to tell you something right now as we have 40 seconds left. This has put a smile on my face, Mr. Blaine. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. My network thanks you. And we've got so much more involved to do when we get together on our live interview, and we'll talk about that later. But I want everybody around the world to say thank you to Mr. Hal Blaine for being alive in our music, being alive in our lives, and living to be a young 89 years old. You've got a whole world ahead of you. So with that said, Hal, I gotta sign off now. I love you, brother. God bless you.
Listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And we will talk soon. And everybody go to halblaine.com and patronize this man. Hal, we love you, brother. We'll talk to you real soon. There's the music right now. Guys, thank you very much. Jackie Bertoni, Jackie's Groove, brought to you by Intertalk Media. Connect to all things music. Mr. Blaine,
take care, Jack. God bless.
I love you, sir. This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbear.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.